Consider confidence amid the questions. Welcome as we take another look into the life and message of Elisabeth Elliot, who called us to live to a higher standard each day, that we would not be satisfied with just a little empty religion in life as a shallow substitute for giving God our best. We'll continue in the coming weeks to hear from family, friends, and others influenced by Elisabeth Elliot. Hey, thanks for joining us today. Well, we're wrapping up our series on fear and old age today, and we'll have some time to go back and remember what it was like after the 5 missionaries, including Jim Elliot, were killed as they tried to reach out to a tribal group in Ecuador. We hear from 2 of the widows of those 5 men. Well, that's coming up later. Also coming up, some thoughts from a South Korean missionary, and a friend of Elisabeth has some thoughts about old age and what Elisabeth thought about it. Right now, though, let's wrap up that series, Fear and Old Age. And if you have a loved one in a nursing home, is that a fearful time, both for the person going into that care facility and for family and friends watching? Hey, if I were to ask you how old you are, do you have any hesitancy to tell me? Part 5 of Fear and Old Age.
I've written a little booklet called Forget Me Not, which came out of my own experience of watching my dear mother become senile and have to be taken care of in a convalescent home in Pennsylvania. And as I visited her there, I saw a good many people that were in much worse shape than she was, and my reaction was like that of most of us, I suppose. You go into a place like that, and everything in you just revolts against what you see. All these dear old people who look like corpses, their jaws hanging open, sometimes they're drooling, sometimes they're making meaningless sounds or shouting or banging on the tray of their wheelchairs. And everything in us just recoils and we say, I can't bear it. Just think, I might be there. I don't want it. I don't want any part of it. And the truth is, we're scared to death. The fear of old age. Well, this little booklet that I wrote called Forget Me Not deals with some of the things that the Lord showed me and comforted me with as I contemplated the prospect of my mother getting worse or of myself getting just like the worst of the people that I saw in that institution. So if you're interested in getting that little booklet, which really gives some help in how to regard and care for God's aging children, you can call and ask for Forget Me Not. The fear of old age is basically the fear of death, isn't it? Why is it that we refuse to tell our age? Well, I don't. And the only reason that I don't mind telling my age, well, I shouldn't say the only reason. There are several good reasons. One of them is that it's pretty obvious, isn't it? We're not really kidding anybody when we'd like them to think we're younger. And secondly, it's the will of God for me to be this age. He was the one that decided that I was to be born in December of 1926. Why is it that we want to dye our hair, have our faces lifted, wear sweatsuits and running shoes instead of dress, which would be a little bit more appropriate to grandmothers and grandfathers, subscribe to the youth cult, or deny the truth, which is the will of God? I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I have a sneaking suspicion that deep down underneath, we are scared of old age. We really are trying to deny it. It's a form of what I suppose psychologists would call denial. And just as much as part 3 is God's story, so were parts 1 and 2. Why not receive it and rejoice in it and offer back all that it means to Him? I offer back my age, my elderliness, whatever you want to call it, my sunset years, my golden age. I offer it up to Jesus. It was his idea in the first place. It is as an old woman that I am to glorify God. And so I say, yes, Lord, I'll take it. I will rejoice in it, and I will offer it to you with thanksgiving. I had a letter from my mother-in-law, Jim Elliott's mother, way back in 1973, and she had been pondering Psalm 71, verses 14 to 23. And she said, I felt that these verses were just for me, because I often feel so unnecessary and wonder why I am left here. This generation needs people who have faith and trust the Lord, and for encouragement. When one is old and often in pain and just tired, one feels so useless. And verses like this speak to me and give me a lift when badly needed. Why should I be left here when Ad, she was referring to my second husband who had just died, so capable and needed, is taken? I remember when Jim was taken. Dad wept bitterly and asked God that question, feeling that Jim had so much to give in his youth. But God's ways are not our ways. He knows, and we just believe and trust. One's longings cannot be expressed. That was a letter from my mother-in-law, Mom Elliott, in 1973, and she was very badly crippled from arthritis and from an unbalanced hip and from loss of calcium. Her hands were extremely crippled, and she was in a wheelchair and on a crutch, and I can understand why, normally, naturally speaking, humanly speaking, she would just be tired and feeling useless and needing that 71st Psalm. But the Bible tells me that gray hair is a crown of glory. Well, I look at my crown of glory in the mirror every morning. Proverbs 16, verse 31. Gray hair is a crown of glory, and it is won by a virtuous life. I don't want to disguise that crown that God has given me. In Acts 17, verse 26, we read, He determined the times set for them and the exact places where they should live. God has determined the date of your birth, the date of your death. And on this particular day, think of the fact that God determined the age that you would be. My brother Phil often sends me a birthday card only because of my 4 brothers. His birthday is the closest to mine, and we usually remember each other's. He's number 1 in the family of 6, and I'm number 2. And last year he sent me a birthday card which said on the outside, I thought birthdays were supposed to make you look older. And I opened the card and inside said, but I don't think you look any worse than you did last year. Well, of course, Phil doesn't see me very often, and I know that I do look a little worse, but probably not too much more ravaged. Somebody figured out that if a human life is analogous to a single day's waking hours, say 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., then a 20-year-old is at 10 o'clock in the morning, a 30-year-old at noon, a 40, 2 p.m., a 60-year-old, 6 p.m. So I'm getting on into the evening. But each hour is in God's hand. To me, that's a happy prospect. I'm going to see His face. I'm going to be like Him. Am I afraid? Perfect love casts out fear. My love isn't perfect. I still have some fears. But the more He teaches me to love Him, the more I trust Him. And the more I trust Him, the less room there is for fear. There's no fear for the future. God is already there. Isn't that a terrific prospect? In 2 Corinthians 4:11, Paul says, we are consigned to our death every day for the sake of Jesus, so that in our mortal flesh the life of Jesus too may be openly shown. Now, would you allow me for once to quote from Plato? I don't lay Plato and Socrates on you very often, but this is so appropriate to what I wanted to say today. From Plato's Phaedo. Socrates replied with a smile, O Simmias, what are you saying? I am not very likely to persuade other men that I do not regard my present situation as a misfortune, if I cannot even persuade you that I am no worse off now than at any other time in my life. I should put in a parenthesis that Socrates was in prison, facing his death. Will you not allow that I have as much of the spirit of prophecy in me as the swans? For they, when they perceive that they must die, having sung all their life long, do then sing more lustily than ever, rejoicing in the thought that they are about to go away to the God whose ministers they are. But men, because they are themselves afraid of death, slanderously affirm of the swans that they sing a lament at the last, not considering that no bird sings when cold or hungry or in pain, not even the nightingale, nor the swallow, nor yet the hoopoe, which are said indeed to tune a lay of sorrow, although I do not believe this to be true of them any more than of the swans. But because they are sacred to Apollo, they have the gift of prophecy and anticipate the good things of another world. Wherefore they sing and rejoice in that day more than ever they did before. And I too, believing myself to be the consecrated servant of the same God, and the fellow servant of the swans, think of that. We human beings are servants of God, aren't we? And so are swans and all other creatures. And Socrates says, being a fellow servant of the swans, and thinking that I have received from my master gifts of prophecy not inferior to theirs, I would not go out of life less merrily than the swans. Have you heard that the swan song is a lament? Well, Socrates takes issue with that. As he points out, no bird sings when cold or hungry or in pain, not even the nightingale. So the swan is not singing a sorrowful farewell. He is singing at the prospect of going to the master who gave him his gifts. Will you go out of life less merrily than the swans? There's no reason to, if you have the hope that all Christians are given. We shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Don't be afraid of old age. Thank God for it.
The wrap-up of our 5-part look at fear and old age. What did Elizabeth think about getting older? Her friend Juana Mikels has some thoughts about that.
I love how in Elizabeth's old age, she said, I'm not getting old. I done got there. And she was looking so forward to heaven. You know, you so seldom hear that these days, that people say they're looking towards heaven. I mean, everybody wants to look younger. The Bible does tell us that gray hair is the splendor of the old. So I love that. Thank you, Elizabeth. I remember once someone asked Elizabeth if they thought God would be mad at them if they got a facelift. I think she laughed and just said, well, I don't think God will be mad at you. You do whatever you think is right. She said, I'm not getting one.
Juana Mikels, a friend of Elizabeth Elliot. Well, as we've been thinking the last few weeks about fear and old age, how does fear affect a missionary? Think of those 5 men, including Jim Elliot, who gave their lives reaching out to a tribal group who was known at that point as the Alcas. Well, we have some comments from Mary Lou McCully and M.Saint, whose husbands were killed by the Alca warriors. This is from a record album from Nancy Woolnow called The Aucas Story. And this is a look at what happened right after the death of those 5 men, including Mary Lou and Marge's husbands.
This is Mary Lou McCully continuing the Alcas story for you today. As we think about Alca history from 1955 up until the present time, probably the greatest part of the story was the day, October 8th, 1958, when Betty Elliott, with her daughter Valerie and Rachel Saint and Diuma, arrived in the tribe of Aucas to live.
Well, last Monday, October the 6th, Betty and Rachel accepted that invitation and set out for Auca land, accompanied by little Valerie Elliott and the 10 Aucas who had recently come out. After 3 days on the trail and river, they arrived on Wednesday afternoon, October the 8th at 3:30 p.m. On Thursday, one of the MAF pilots, Johnny Keenan, flew over the area and saw that they had arrived. The technicians here at HCJB had made a little transceiver set which weighs only 6 pounds. Using this little set, the girls were able to assure the pilot that all is well. Just before setting out on the trail, Betty wrote saying, "I would like to repeat what I have said to several when they knew of my intention to enter the tribe. I would never go because I thought it would be safe, or for any other reason, such as carrying on my husband's work, or whatever. There is one reason alone. I believe it is simply the next step. It is the thing required at the moment. To God the Lord belongs escape from death." Since they have been with the Alcas, we've had no direct word from them, except by radio, which is of necessity very brief. We hope to have more details for all of our listeners soon.
And more word did come in. The date, October of 1958. Marjorie Saint reporting.
Yes, Bob, now we have direct word from Betty Elliott and Rachel Saint, who, as everyone knows perhaps by now, are with the Alcas. On October the 9th, Betty wrote, "I'm sitting in a tiny leaf shack by candlelight. Millions of insects swarm. Quichuas laugh. Valerie sings 'Jesus Loves Me' to a group of Alcas in a hut a few feet away, and my heart sings praises to God, who only doth wondrous things. Keep praising and praying." On the same day, Rachel wrote, "It was a sweet picture to round the bend in the river last Wednesday and see the roofs of the little thatched houses and the lovely bronzed Alca bodies gleaming in the sun. To be able to communicate with them was wonderful. I am well aware that potential danger exists, but whatever, the welcome could not have been more friendly. It seems the most natural thing in the world to be here, a thing I have felt the Lord was leading me to for over 5 years. Do pray that it will be workable and accomplish the Lord's purposes. Dayuma's mother has arrived, dressed in the dress Dayuma had made for her. A dear, characterful face, older than I thought she would be, trembling with sheer happiness. I guess she ran most of the way. Before the evening was over, she said to me, 'You are Star. You came down from the sky. You are my daughter. Call me Mother.' She hasn't stopped smiling for almost a whole day. Little by little, I try to sow seeds of God's Word, but mostly I'm just tuning in, trusting the Lord to give me wisdom beyond my own and a tongue looser than my own. Love to all of you who share our present joy and our increased potential of telling of Him, whose we are, and whom we serve."
Here is Marge Saint again with the November 2nd, 1958 report of life in the tribe.
Last Wednesday, a small mission plane flew over a small jungle clearing on the edge of a small river and lowered to the ground a small bucket fastened to a long cord. And in this bucket were various items needed by 2 missionary women, Betty Elliott and Rachel Saint. When the bucket was once again reeled into the plane, it contained letters from them to the outside world. Betty writes, "Yesterday the plane came over bringing the meat, fish, cheese, candy, toasted avas, canned meat, and so forth. Thanks so much for all your thoughtfulness and for your letters and prayers and understanding. The problems are not all solved with an apparently successful entrance into the tribe. Now the problems are new ones and the testings of a different nature. There are now 10 houses, all of them tiny leaf shacks, about 6 by 8 feet, except for those which Gikita and Kimu are in the process of building. Rachel sleeps under the roof which Gikita put up. Val and I have our own private, in quotes, house. There are no walls, of course, or floor, plenty of fresh air. Weather is ideal, not hot as I had expected, and no mosquitoes. Plenty of gnats between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Yesterday afternoon it rained and blew hard. I saw again how sensibly these people adapt themselves to their environment. Of course, the rain blows straight through the house. What does one do? One blows up the fire, hangs up one's few possessions in a carrying net under the ridgepole, and stretches out in the hammock. You get wet naturally. What does it matter? The fire keeps you warm, and it dries out your hammock. The Indians still have the advantage over us. Their possessions are a blowgun and darts, a few clay pots, a fish spear, and a net, a hammock, and a basket or two. They do not include camera, radio, tape recorder, notebooks, and clothes, which must be kept dry. However, I find that baskets and nets are suitable storage closets when hung high. The other night I was wakened twice during the night to receive monkey limbs to eat. Were I a proper Alca, I would have risen, blown up my fire, and cooked some manioc and made myself a meal. But still being a gringo at heart, I stuck them up in the thatch to eat for breakfast. I wish you could see this gang eat. Last night when the meat came in, Mankamu cooked it up and then called the men together. She throws a pile of steamed yucca and bananas onto a leaf on the ground, opens a pot of boiled beef, and everyone grabs all he can. The sound effects, smacking, sucking, tearing, munching, are fantastic. It is all over in about 3 minutes. The men rise from their haunches, the women lick up whatever remains, and they scatter into the twilight. No one has said a word, help yourself or thank you or anything. Then the fires are fanned, showing up the ragged silhouettes of leaf huts. Hammocks are strung, and quiet settles in. The toads, frogs, and crickets start in with their occasional horn-like call of a munditi bird, like they gave Ed and Mary Lou, and once, according to Diuma, the panting of a nearby puma. Breakfast this morning, besides certain civilized blessings which you sent in, was the forearm and a clenched fist with drawn white skin and black nails of a monkey. Not bad, except for the very penetrating flavor of burnt hair. Last night, Gikita and 2 sons brought 5 monkeys and 2 birds, caught with blowguns and poison darts. We all sat around while Mankamu thrust the hopeless animals one after another into the fire, till the thick fur burned itself into sizzling, popping balls. Then into the pot they went while everyone sat and jabbered till chow time. Then they passed out the meat along with yucca and bananas, and we all sucked and tore away. It is quite impossible to bite monkey flesh. You simply clamp your incisors on it and tear. It is a comfort to know that meat is easily digested, even if not chewed. Yesterday afternoon, Watu gave me 2 of my favorite fish, a descendant, I understand, of an armored prehistoric species. For the first time, I discovered why Indians regard the head as choice. I found it delectable, especially the brains and eyes. I had somehow mistakenly assumed they were very bitter. There is a horde of kids around which keeps Valerie happy. She is, of course, in her element in an Indian environment, would rather drink their stringy, lumpy banana drink than milk. Seems to sleep every bit as soundly on bamboo as on a mattress. She plays in the river whenever anyone goes down to fish, bathe, or wash pots. She hacks away at trees with a machete, fans fires, strings beads, twists fibers, and generally makes an alka of herself. The first day we arrived, Val just sat down on the log, which Kimu was squatting on, and stared and stared. And then she said, "Mommy, who is that? Is that my daddy? He looks like a daddy." Somehow in her child mind, she had associated Alcas and Daddy, though I had never told her until a few days ago that the Alcas had killed her daddy. I waited until she had met 5 of the men, and then I told her that these men had killed her daddy. She said, "Oh." She prays for them and for the others she knows by name. Now that I have met these men who killed our husbands, I find it very strange. Strange to find myself between 2 very remote sides of a story. To us, it meant everything in life, and continues to mean that. To these simple, laughing, carefree forest people, killing 5 men was little more than routine, and they have probably nearly forgotten about it now. The story, as I have managed to get it thus far, is that the men were on the beach. The Alcas leaped suddenly out of the forest from behind the tree house and killed them immediately. I suppose they jumped back into the water, hoping to evade the sudden shower of spears. Last night, Diuma was telling me more of the thrillers that are routine small talk in this outfit. It seems that when Nomonga went to finish off George, he didn't do a very thorough job. George, knowing he wouldn't pull through, went to his own grave, under his own locomotion, got in, and then he asked them to go ahead and cover him up. These are the men and women with whom we live and eat. Don't forget to pray.
From the Aucas Story record album, produced by Nancy Woolnow. Well, as we've been thinking about missions in Ecuador, take a quick moment with us and think about a South Korean missionary and how the ministry of Elizabeth Elliot has been of help to her.
Hello, I'm sending this message to you from South Korea, where I've been a missionary since 1991 and was raising our 4 children in Korea in the 90s, and obviously did not have access to Elizabeth's radio program in Korea, but I was able to get her tapes, and I would listen to them over and over again, and any book by her that I could get my hands on, I would read, and would say that outside of my parents, I was discipled by Elizabeth Elliot. And it's funny today, as I listen to her podcast, I realize what a big influence she had on me, because some of the things and the advice and the quotes that I share in ministry today, I'm seeing come directly from her. I remember in the 90s as a homeschooling, stay-at-home missionary mom, how validated I felt and how encouraged I felt whenever I listened to Elizabeth's teaching. And so I just want to say thank you so much for your ministry and keeping her teaching alive. It's still blessing me, and I know it's blessing many others.
That was Rhonda, a South Korean missionary. Thanks for sharing some of your thoughts with us today. And friend, you can leave a comment as well at elizabethelliot.org. You can also find talks, devotionals, videos, more Gateway to Joy programs, and other resources at elizabethelliot.org. Thanks for letting us come along with you today, wherever you've been headed. And on behalf of the Elizabeth Elliot Foundation, in cooperation with the Bible Broadcasting Network, let me thank you for joining us today. And until next time, may God remind you each day that you are loved with an everlasting love, and underneath are those everlasting arms.